Hey everyone, welcome to Inside the Pizza Oven, powered by Fredi the Pizza Man Foundation. Today's guest, Jeremy Reisman, Managing Editor, Pride of Detroit.
This segment is brought to you by Les Stanford Cadillac Chevrolet in Dearborn, Michigan. Please visit lesstanford.com.
Jeremy Reisman, Pride of Detroit. Welcome in, buddy.
Hey, thanks for having me, Fredi.
Thank you, man. And I called you Jerry already, so I got to make sure. Jeremy Reisman.
Nailed it.
Yeah. How many times have people called you Jerry Rice?
It's been a while since like grade school. I was kind of good at football back then, so I kind of wanted to be called Jerry Reisman, but didn't stick too long.
So managing editor of Pride of Detroit, right?
Yeah, that's right.
We're going to talk about the Lions. We're going to talk about your blog later and all that. But obviously, this show is stemmed around autism.
Mm-hmm.
You know, promote autism awareness, the foundation. And you told me that you started with autism in 2008. You graduated from the University of Michigan.
Yeah.
Psychology. How'd you get into autism?
I just kind of fell into it. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with my degree when I graduated, and a family friend of ours works with special needs kids, and so she found an opportunity at the Hope Center here in Michigan, and I volunteered there for 6 months, started to really like it, started to really be good at it. It's basically a place where you work one-on-one with children with autism. Yeah. So I kind of learned behavioral psychology, behavioral therapy for children's psychology. Eventually I became employed by them after 6 months. And then it kind of grew from there. I made the decision to move out to Los Angeles, just not necessarily related to the field or anything, but behavioral psychology was kind of on the cutting edge there 10 years ago. So I moved out there in 2009, 2010, and basically was a behavioral therapist for 4 or 5 years out there. And it's just something that I was naturally really good at. I've always kind of wanted to work with children. I feel like I have kind of a special connection with them, and to kind of, be a special needs therapist there, I thought was something that was really giving a lot of value to the community, more so than maybe just, a babysitter would necessarily.
It's being here in Michigan, you'd be in LA, California for a while. Did you notice a difference of maybe autism there? I'm not saying autism is different, but maybe the way they handled it, or maybe the way they saw it. Was it more open? Is here or?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think maybe a little bit more accepted in Los Angeles, at least at the time. Obviously, awareness is growing by the day. But yeah, I think since I'm mostly working in the homes of the families, I didn't really necessarily see a bunch of, in the community and how it affects the families when, they're out at the grocery store or, running errands, things like that.
Yeah.
But those are also some things that we did kind of try to work on, because it's something that's, it's a big step for some kids is being out in public, being around other people and behaving. And it's tough for the family. It's tough for the children, because a lot of them don't have that, aspect of communication that's necessary for social events. I found it kind of interesting coming back to Michigan 10 years later and noticing the differences between, when I left and when I came back. And, there's definitely more acceptance and more really knowledge about the whole situation.
So when you came back to Michigan, did you stay working in that field or?
No, I kind of phased out of it after about 4 or 5 years in California. Part of it was because of the opportunity I got with Pride of Detroit. Part of it was just, it's a tough job. It really is.
Yeah.
And I see, the exhaustion on some parents, and I really kind of understood that after being in the field for so long. And it's something that I always have considered going back to if I need to, if I get the itch, so to speak. Just at the time, it started to kind of wear on my own mental health a little bit, just because it's an exhausting thing.
It is hard. I'm a parent, so I understand.
And you have to learn to take little victories sometimes, because the progress with some of these children are slow. And it's different along the whole spectrum,
Yeah.
Some are obviously high functioning and you can make a lot of progress in a small amount of time. Other times you just kind of have to take it incrementally. And so, I just found it at the time, I wasn't quite ready to handle it full time. And so I decided to kind of phase away from it for now. And like I said, it's something that I always consider potentially going back to.
If you or your family is touched by autism, learn more about Fredi's foundation at #PopTheTap at FrediThePizzaMan.com. That's Fredi, thepizzaman.com, or email FrediThePizzaman@gmail.com.
So you come back to Michigan. You start. You had the opportunity of Pride of Detroit.
Mhm.
Before you get back to Michigan, how was it living in LA?
It was interesting. I mean, I basically spent almost all my 20s there, and it was great. It was great for the time being. It was something that I could never really see myself settling down in, just because, it's a fun city where there's a lot of young people running around, and you don't see a ton of families living there, although they're there. But I was a big stand-up comedy fan, and there's obviously probably no place better in the world to be than Los Angeles for that. So I was going out and seeing shows 2-3 times a year, or a week, I should say, that you can probably see once a year here in Detroit, just because of the talent that's there every single night working out their sets and things like that.
So it'd be almost like if you saw the movie Swingers, it'd be almost just like that.
Not quite as intense, at
Yeah.
least the way I lived it,
Yeah.
but yeah, in a certain way for sure.
Was there any football teams when you were there?
Yeah, the Rams came back towards the end of me being there. I didn't really get to see quite the hype. They weren't as good as they are now.
Jeff Fisher, the Jeff Fisher
Yeah,
Rams.
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, it wasn't the best of times there.
How is the sports market in LA? Like when you listen to talk radio here in Detroit, you have the 4 major teams.
Yeah,
In LA, when you listen to talk radio, is there sports talk radio there?
there is. I grew very cynical of the LA sports scene because I'm Detroit through and through. Like
Yeah.
I did not become a Rams fan. I didn't become a Kings fan. And so I kind of grew cynical. The Kings won the Stanley Cup while I was there, and it
Yeah.
seemed like no one cared.
Yeah.
I literally went down to downtown UCLA, and there was no, like, I was just thinking, if this was Detroit, bars would be packed, people
Yeah.
would be going crazy. The games weren't even being played on some bars in Los Angeles.
Wow.
So I grew a little cynical there. Obviously, they love their Lakers, they love the Dodgers. There's a pretty big fan base there, but
Clippers.
yeah, Clippers now too. That's right.
Yeah.
But I think given the weather, given all the other entertainment options, sports kind of takes a second or third level of priority there in Los Angeles. So they're certainly not as maniacal as Detroit fans.
Yeah. I was, when we were doing a little email exchange, I was asking you about some favorite players and some things that you took away from your parents. Your dad had said something to you that stuck with you that I found interesting.
Mm-hmm.
He told you to do something uncomfortable every day.
Yeah.
Explain that.
Yeah, I think it's a way to grow, right? If you just kind of go about your normal habits every day, you're not going to be emotionally happy. You're not going to grow as a person. You're not going to learn to do things that maybe you didn't think you'd like or you didn't think you'd be comfortable doing. But then you find out, hey, I'm actually really good at this, and you grow as a person. So, I remember it started at a really young age. Like, I was afraid to call a girl on the phone.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do it. And so you do something uncomfortable like that and say, like, now you can grow. Now you have no problem talking to someone on the phone or talking to a girl on the phone or approaching a girl in a bar, things like that. And the more you live life scared to do things like that, to take a step like moving to LA just out of college on a whim, I think you benefit from that sort of thing. And it's something I still carry with me today.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you learn from your mistakes, right? So
Sure.
sometimes you have to do something to make a mistake, and then you really learn.
Yeah.
I always believe that people learn more from mistakes than they do from something positive.
No question. And I
Yeah.
think other people have to realize that when other people make mistakes too, is that they're learning. Like, allow people to make mistakes so that they can grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of we talked about a couple names, and one of them was, well, both were productive, but one was really productive. Louis Delmas and Deandre Levy.
Yeah.
Deandre Levy, Louis Delmas, he did his thing, and he was fine.
Yeah.
Now, Deandre Levy, he was up for Defensive Player of the Year. Was it 13?
13 or 14, I think.
13?
Yeah.
He was on top of his game.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it just went away. I mean, describe Deandre Levy. He was a great draft pick.
Yeah. No, I mean, a really interesting person, which I think is part of the reason why I like him so much. But on the field, I really think he was a top 5 linebacker of his time. And unfortunately, that time was so short, like you mentioned, with all the injuries. But that 2014 defense wouldn't have been the same without him. I think, Ndamukong Suh gets a lot of the attention for that team and for what they did. But Deandre Levy, I feel like, was really kind of the heart of that defense because he could do everything.
Yeah.
I mean, and since then, we talk about linebackers, they can't cover, they can't blitz, they can't, run fit. He did it all. And it's really kind of rare to find a linebacker that has all of those pieces, that can cover, that can blitz, that can tackle, that can really, blow up a screen. That, to me, that was like his quintessential play. He was such a smart player that he'd recognize a screen before the ball was even out of the quarterback's hands and blow it up. And that can be a game-changing play.
3rd round pick from Wisconsin. It's funny, I'm an older guy, so I always say we're still looking for our running back since Barry Sanders.
Yeah.
And you could say the Lions are still looking for that linebacker since Deandre Levy.
Absolutely. They've gone through a couple of recent draft picks that haven't quite worked out as they wanted to, and Levy has certainly, I think, been their best linebacker draft pick since then, for sure.
So a couple of your favorite players you brought up to me, and I agree with. I definitely agree with one of them. They're all great players, but Larry Fitzgerald, great player.
Yeah.
Great. And do you think this will be his last year?
I hope not. I would completely understand, obviously, given where he is in his career. I don't know, 37, 38, or whatever he is. But yeah, just to really play at that high of a level for as long as he did is rare. It's rare at any position. I feel like it's even more rare at wide receiver because you lose kind of those physical tools that separate you as an athlete from all the other players on the field, your speed, your agility. But for someone to kind of adjust his game on the run like he did, now kind of becoming more of a big slot receiver than his speedy outside receiver that he started his career with, and then the hurting he put on the Packers in that playoff game in overtime is a game I'm never going to forget because obviously I don't like the Packers very much. And yeah, I don't think you could find a nicer person off the field either, which obviously plays a big part into why I like him so much.
And he should have had a Super Bowl, man. It took a great pass by Roethlisberger and an even greater catch by Santonio Holmes. I mean, think about that play.
Yeah,
he could have had a Super Bowl.
Absolutely. And I mean, there was the Harrison pick six at the end of the first half too. I mean, that whole Super Bowl could have been a lot different. And hopefully Larry gets a Super Bowl ring in the last couple of years of his career.
They're building something pretty good over there. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes, you see him rewriting all the record books when it's all said and done. And the reason I ask you that before you answer is he's got so much money now.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think he'll and the Super Bowls? He's got a Super Bowl.
Sure.
Do you think there's a chance he loses his passion? He doesn't rewrite the record books?
It's hard for me to say that from afar because I don't know the guy personally. I don't get that sense from him from afar. I get the sense that he loves the game. I mean, you can just see the smile on his face when he's out there playing. It seems like he's having a blast. And so I don't think the money necessarily is going to taint that. I look at a guy when I see him play and I see a guy that's changing the game. I see a guy that's, absolutely will rewrite the history books, the stats, all of that sort of stuff, because we live in a different NFL where teams are throwing for 300 yards every single week. I think that used to feel like a special benchmark for a quarterback on Sundays, and now it's kind of the expectation. And so we're going to see it with Stafford first because he was kind of the first of that era. He'll break some yardage records. I mean, he already has. But I think Patrick Mahomes, will be 10 years behind him and eventually probably break every record that he sets as well.
That Kansas City team, they almost have the look like if Andy Reid gets tired and that team can go south really quick in a couple of years. I mean, that the salary cap on that team could just blow up on that team.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about the NFL is there are a lot of franchises that don't go through the parity of most teams, but yeah, it can collapse in a hurry. I mean, look at Jacksonville, the Jaguars. They went to the AFC Championship 3 years ago, and now basically everyone from that defense is gone.
Yeah.
They literally went through a trade today.
The draft today. I can't pronounce his name, but he went to the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, Yannick Ngakoue.
Ngakoue.
Yeah.
So I wish Bob Quinn would make one of those moves. I'm looking right at the camera. It's once in a while. But anyways, I digress. Last name for me, Deandre Hopkins. This is people probably take it the wrong way, but I think he's just a great fantasy player. He's a great player, but I think he's a great fantasy player. He hasn't done anything to win them games.
Yeah, I mean,
playoff games.
That's true, but neither did Calvin Johnson. I don't think you would necessarily say anything bad about him as a player.
I can't say nothing more. I can't say. I was going to ask you about Calvin Johnson later. We're going to talk about Calvin Johnson. That's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, and to me, I don't play fantasy football. I despise it for plenty of reasons, but he's the guy that you're going to see on SportsCenter the next morning. He's making some incredible catches, and that's to me like there's a lot more obviously to the wide receiver than flash and flare of one-handed catches and things like that.
Blocking.
But yeah, I think he really does it all, and I think now that he's in Arizona, it's a good chance that he might show up.
So how did you start with Pride of Detroit? And by the way, Pride of Detroit was the first blog to be credentialed by Detroit Lions. So that's pretty good. That's really good feat there.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. How did you get involved with Pride of Detroit?
Well, the guy who created the site about 12, 13 years ago, Sean Ewell, he was looking for talent, and I had been writing, Pride of Detroit has a section called fan posts, where anyone that has, registers an account for free can write any sort of post about anything. They can do their own film breakdowns, they can give their own opinions on moves, on who they should draft, things like that. And so I started writing previews for every game in there. It's just something that I was doing on the side while I was, working with the children with autism. I was actually running a dog daycare during the time as well. And so I was just kind of doing it for fun. I did during the 2008 season first, as part of, I think, my own mental health, my own, it was my own version of therapy in a way. It's just like writing down my thoughts, getting through that horrible 0-16 season. And so I developed this preview that was kind of unique in a way that I think not a lot of previews were written. He had noticed it in the fan post. A lot of people were liking it, commenting on it. And so he decided to hire me part-time, just essentially writing for free, but I was on the front page now. So I was writing, I was getting an audience, I was kind of developing my own voice. Eventually I got hired on as a paid contributor. And then in 2015, when Sean decided to step down from the site, I was the first person he thought of to recommend to SB Nation, which is the set of sites that owns Pride of Detroit, and went through a little, audition, interview, that sort of thing, and they decided they wanted to keep me, and been running the site for 5 years since.
So just kind of in a nutshell, the blogs, your blog, money's made through advertising and all that, clicks and all that?
Yeah, so our set of websites is called SB Nation. So there's basically a blog for every professional sports team. They're owned by Vox Media. They're the ones that essentially sign my paycheck. And yeah, I think they kind of get their pay through advertising. There's no subscription model or anything like that. All of our content is free for our listeners, our readers, all that sort of stuff. And so, I don't get paid by a per click basis or, ad revenue or anything like that. I just kind of get a monthly thing here and there. But yeah, I think we mostly get, funded through ads and things like that.
So, before we touch on the 2020 Detroit Lions and what a year, the pandemic year.
Yeah.
With the Lions, you always have to go back.
Sure.
So I go back to, you brought up 2008. I'm going to go back to 2000 because that's when Matt Millen came along.
Sure.
2008, that's when it ended. What do you make? Well, I don't even know how to ask this question because when you talk to the Detroit Lions, you don't even know how to bring it. But 2008, what were your thoughts when 2008 ended? Because not only did they go 0-16, there was no talent on that team.
Yeah.
Other than Kelvin Johnson and I don't know.
Yeah, that's about it. It does a number on you as a fan. It really does. I mean, it makes you rethink everything. And I happened to move out to LA literally the following year, so it was like I had a choice to make at that point with my fandom. Like, is this something I really want to continue? It's a hard question to ask yourself as someone as diehard as I was, because I'd literally been going to games since I was a kid. We had season tickets up until that 2008 season. And so I had to look at myself and be like, is this something I can continue to do? It's stressful as a fan. You really pour your heart into your fandom. And I was the kind of person that, Sundays would kind of ruin my day. And that season was especially tough, obviously. And I just kind of looked at myself and was just like, is this something I want to continue to do? And ultimately I decided yes. And, I think I've since kind of grown up as a fan and not necessarily taken it so emotionally so that I continue with life. I can, maintain some sort of professionalism, especially now that I'm going to games as media. And so I don't quite take it as emotionally hard. But at the same time, I do think maybe there's a little bit of me that died that season that I haven't gotten back.
For me, it wasn't the 16 losses. It was like there was no talent on that team.
Yeah.
They were just hard to watch.
Oh, yeah.
They were just, I can still picture the running backs, and I can't think of their names. I want to say maybe Artos Pinner. It was one of them. He'd get the ball and he'd run 3 yards, and the defensive tackle would catch him from behind. I mean, it was slow. They were just not good, man.
The thing I remember specifically is just like I remember hearing radio hosts and TV people saying there's no way in today's NFL that this team can go 0-16, and then suddenly it's like 0-10, 0-11.
Yeah.
And I'm watching this team like they can't stop anyone. Their defense was one of the worst defenses of all time. And so I'm just sitting here like, I know all these pundits are saying this team is eventually going to win a game. They can't go 0-16. I'm sitting here and saying, like, I'm looking at the schedule. I don't see it. And I was pretty convinced, like, maybe not halfway through the season, but at least, like, once they got to 0-10, I'm like, this is happening, and I better just prepare for it now.
I'm surprised there's not a 30 for 30 for that.
Right.
I'm waiting for that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you some questions. Obviously, 2009, Martin Mayhew came, and Javid Best, they were 5-0 Monday Night Football.
Yeah.
2011, he never plays again. If Javid Best never gets hurt, he continues playing. Is Martin Mayhew still the GM?
Man,
I really think that Javid Best, they were on their
Yeah.
way. I really believe that they were
Yeah.
on their way.
I mean, that team did have some flaws. They were kind of growing as a defensive team. I don't think they were where they needed to be quite yet. But I have a very strong memory of the following game against the 49ers, obviously kind of highlighted by the handshake after the game.
And then Atlanta,
Yeah.
they lost 2 in a row.
Yeah, and yeah,
The reason why I ask you about Javid Best is because he doesn't get hurt. They have their running back
right,
for a while. Then the next year they chased by getting Mikel LaShore,
right,
and then they brought in Reggie Bush, and obviously they had to use draft capital. And they traded up for LaShore.
sure.
If Best never gets hurt, maybe the script is a little different for Martin Mayhew, because I actually thought he did okay in the way he built the team.
Yeah,
He did okay, and I think the best, and we can say Titus Young, because Titus Young could catch the ball.
right,
He really helped them.
sure.
He just obviously off the field, he wasn't.
Yeah.
It was not.
Yeah, and that has to be part of the evaluation, though, right? Like you
Yeah.
have to kind of. It's a reason why they go through all these crazy processes of the Wonderlic test and things like that. There's an emotional toll that football takes on people, and you have to make sure you have someone who can handle it. And so I do think Martin Mayhew was a decent general manager. He certainly took the Lions out of a significant hole. And really, I mean, let's be honest, going from 0-16 to a playoff team in 3 years,
Yep.
that's no minor accomplishment.
Yep.
That's significant. And so I think, and you can see by his work now in San Francisco, he has talent. And
He's going to get another job. I really believe that.
I think he might. I
Yeah.
really do think he might. And I think he was good for what the Lions needed at the time. I think he got the Lions to a certain place. And then, when he got fired along with Jim Caldwell, a couple of years later.
Tom Lawan, you mean?
Tom
Yeah,
Lawan,
yeah.
and then Jim Caldwell a
Yeah,
couple of years
yeah.
after that. It's a confluence of so many factors that result in the 1-7 start that they had that season. And it's coaching, it's general managing, it's all sorts of things. And so it's sometimes it's hard to separate the general manager from the actual record and see where he made mistakes, where he didn't. But overall, I look honestly at Martin Mayhew's time overall positively.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know if I would necessarily say they moved on from him too quickly, because I don't think that the team was all that talented when they had that 1-7 start. But again, the way they responded that year too, actually almost getting back into the playoff race, kind of shows that it wasn't a total disaster the way he left the team.
Another thing that helped Martin Mayhew at the end too was the guy Wisenhunt didn't take the job, and Caldwell came along.
True.
So
Yeah.
Jim Schwartz, obviously he was another hot button, and we're going to talk about the 2020 Lions. But how do we look at Jim Schwartz now?
Mm-hmm.
Because when he was here, we all know he used to walk around with. I always say he used to walk around shaking his booty so everybody could see it. That was just him. He preferred the national media over the local media.
Sure.
We all know the stories, but
Yeah.
I'm convinced that he didn't flip off the fans. He'd still be the coach here. Well, let me go back.
Yeah.
Quinn wouldn't have came in, but I really believe that Best doesn't get hurt and Schwartz doesn't flip off the fans. Mayhew and Quinn and Schwartz are still here. I really believe that because the way the Lions are so loyal,
Right.
and there could have been a chance they could have still been here. But anyways, how do we look at Jim Schwartz now? Because when he left, we all thank God he's gone and this and that. But
Yeah.
he seems like he would be a pretty good coach if you tag on with somebody else.
Maybe. I think right now I kind of fall into the crowd of he is where he should be as a defensive coordinator. I mean, he's proven it. He has a great track record as a defensive coordinator, and I think he's comfortable in there. You never know with giving a guys a second chance like that. You think about guys like Patriots offensive coordinator. I can't think of his name right now.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
You know, obviously his
He turned down 2 jobs.
yeah,
too.
he had a disaster in Denver, in Indianapolis,
He turned that down,
and then he
yeah.
turned down the Indianapolis job. And you think like, well, maybe Jim Schwartz has learned, maybe he's more like, I can't remember, Josh McDaniels.
Yeah,
Josh McDaniels. So is he a Josh McDaniels type where like he hasn't really learned his lesson? He's really more. He's better off with less power. You know, with less of a spotlight. You know, we get to talk to coordinators once a month, so basically they don't have to deal with the media. And yeah, maybe that was part of Jim Schwartz's issue. I think they ran a little deeper with you know,
Well, the
how
Buffalo
things
thing, the
happen.
Buffalo thing didn't help either. Getting
Sure.
carried off the field. You know?
Right. Yeah.
So every time he gets interviewed for a job, that's probably what happens.
Right.
I was kind of a Jim Schwartz fan. I'm old enough to remember they brought back Billy Martin 2 or 3 times. You
Yeah.
know? And I thought, man, bring back Jim Schwartz, or bring back Jim Caldwell. Who
Yeah.
knows,
You never
But,
know.
Yeah, we never know. But 2020 Lions, we'll start with the draft.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big Stafford guy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the one that created Stafford, our leader. So I'm a big Stafford guy. But I was in the camp of drafting Tua Tagovailoa.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the camp of drafting him. So obviously that didn't happen. Your thoughts on 2020? I want to get into a few names, but with the pandemic, what do you think we're looking at in 2020?
It's a really, really tough question.
Starting with Stafford. Start with Stafford.
I mean, Stafford, I think he's going to be phenomenal, honestly. I really do. I've always been kind of a Stafford stan as well. And, I mean, we saw with the way 2019 played out, he was on pace to set records for himself. And really, he was a top 5 quarterback, essentially, when he got injured in Oakland. So I really do think, pairing him with the offensive coordinator, Darrell Bevell, they've really opened up the big game again. And that was something that I think Jim Caldwell kind of hamstrung him a little bit. He really tried to make him a more well-rounded quarterback. And I think Stafford did pull some good things from there, but now he's got that deep ball back, and he's got 2 really good receivers at the deep ball. And so I really do think this is going to be a great year for Stafford. I think he's already shown it in training camp. I think we're going to continue to see it. And I think, with all the offensive weapons that this team has, at least on paper, I think this could be a really special year for him.
And I'm with you when it comes to Stafford. The talent's there, the numbers are there. My concern is the reason why I wanted Tua is when you're here for that long and you constantly lose. We saw Barry Sanders leave. We saw Calvin Johnson leave. Do you think, I don't want to say Matthew Stafford's now hungry, but can you see him taking this team to the next level, given the Lions where they've been the last 30 years?
I think he is definitely past the bar of good enough quarterback to win a Super Bowl. I'm not saying, he's an elite or whatever, but I'm saying we've seen plenty of lesser quarterbacks win Super Bowls, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so in terms of his passion, in terms of his, if he's been lionized or anything like that, I don't get a sense of that at all. And I would understand it, being a quarterback of a team that's been to 3 playoff games, won none of them in his career. I could see how a normal person would necessarily get tired of that or want to seek a Super Bowl somewhere else or want to get traded. But in terms of saying the right things, in terms of his intensity in practices, his performance on the field, I see none of that, weariness, none of that tiredness, none of that eagerness to get away. I mean, they've kind of ingrained themselves in this Detroit community as well in terms of what they do off the field.
I think he's good. I think he's a really, really good quarterback. I think he's a great person. I'm just wondering, all those years, was new blood needed? Could there be people in the organization? Could there be people on the team that we're gonna run through a wall for this guy, and maybe there's some that aren't gonna run through a wall.
Yeah.
But if the new guy comes in, maybe there'll be some they'll run through the wall, and maybe things could change. That was the reason why.
Sure.
I just feel like when you're drafting at 3. You're given that pick. You can't really waste that opportunity. Even if he was sitting here for 2 years behind Stafford.
Yeah.
I just think that's why I was in the camp for Tua. And then there ended up being a lot of people were in the camp for Tua.
Yeah, and I understand it too. I do think there's a chance, if the Lions make full scale changes, within the organization after this season, then yeah, that's a conversation that I think the new coaching staff, new GM, if there is all of that, that's a conversation they're definitely going to have, is bringing in someone who will re-energize the franchise. Not that it's not energized under Stafford, but when you got a 32, 33-year-old quarterback, you have to start thinking about the future. And if you're getting a fresh start everywhere else, quarterback's also something you have to consider getting a fresh start with.
In fairness to Stafford, it's not fair to him either that he's got to pile all this on all the 57 years of the Lions.
Right.
It's not fair to him either.
Right.
That's why I think new blood was needed eventually. But that's the issue with the Lions though. They, as long as I've been a fan, they've never hired a GM with experience. They fire a GM, they hire his guy. Then they bring in another GM with no experience. Then he keeps Jim Caldwell. Then he keeps a quarterback. They never do anything. They're never proactive. See,
Yeah.
I see teams like Green Bay, New England. They're drafting quarterback. They're always proactive and they're winning.
Yeah.
And it drives me crazy being a Lions fan. It's like they always, well, we're going to fire Matt Millen, but we're going to hire Martin Mayhew. But understand why we're doing this, okay?
Right.
Because Martin Mayhew wasn't in on all the meetings and this, whatever they told us,
Right.
That's what drives me crazy about the Lions. They're not proactive.
Yeah, and I get that. Like, there was definitely an era of this franchise where there was a little bit too much nepotism or hiring of friends and things like that. I do think that Martha Ford took a big step in kind of pushing that ideology away when they hired Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia. These were guys that are complete outsiders, had no ties with the team, no real ties to the Lions. Now, obviously that hasn't necessarily worked out the way that she had hoped, but I think it did maybe turn a page in how they operate. It's just they didn't happen to get the right guy at the right time, at least so far.
Well, I think they're fully invested. I think most teams probably would have pulled out after this year or
Right.
last year. I think they realized, you know what, we haven't won in 57 years. We tried something different because it hasn't worked after a year, 2 or 3. I think we just might as well just wait the year 5 and just see what happens. I think ironically, I think they all run out after 2021. Correct? All their contracts.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
either 2021 or 2022.
Yeah. So they all run out at the same time. I
Yeah.
think that's just, you know what, let's just do this, and maybe that's what we needed, just to wait it out. But
It's certainly possible. I mean, this year is going to be a big one. I think if things go as bad as they did last year, there's definitely basically I would say everyone's on the hot seat.
Yeah. So you're some of the second, third year guys, Tracy Walker, guys like that. Tavai is a second year guy. These are guys that should be stepping up right now.
Right.
So Tracy Walker, Tavai, Ragnow, Deshaun Hand, he gets a lot of love and he's never been on the field. It drives me crazy. Jared Davis, I always say he should be a defensive end, but what am I? I'm just a pizza guy. I have no idea. Put 20 pounds on him and make him a defensive end and let him rush that passer. Who knows?
Yeah.
These guys, what do you expect from these guys? They should be taking the next step right now.
Yeah, I think Tracy Walker, the guy you circled first, is definitely the guy you should be circling. I think he's a guy that is really poised for a breakout season. We've seen him mature as a person. We've seen him mature as a leader. And really, we saw flashes of what he could be last year. Now that he's got a good teammate in Duron Harmon who can is a guy that he can rely on, a veteran that he doesn't really have to worry about covering for him. He can focus on what he does best, which is, gritty work towards the line of scrimmage, covering tight ends, which is something no Lions defender has really been able to do since Deandre Levy. So I do think Tracy Walker is definitely poised for a big season. Frank Ragnow is another one. Just finished his first year as center. This year, I think he's ready to take that step of really being in the conversation of a top 5 center. He's been dominant against his own team. In practice, he's really kind of grew in his last year, and so I think he's a guy that could be really big. We've already seen, Kenny Galladay's obviously a guy that could take even another bigger step, potentially be that top 10 wide receiver that a lot of Lions fans I think already think he is.
Do you think he gets signed long term?
I do.
Do you think Kenny wants to stay here?
I don't get a sense that he doesn't. I don't get a sense that he's tired of being here. I think he has a good relationship with Matthew Stafford, and I think if they pay the guy enough, he'll stay anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So you brought up Harmon from New England.
Yeah.
They drafted a kid from Boston College, Will
Harris. Yeah.
Will Harris. He made some sneaky plays last year.
He did. He really kind of came into his own towards the end of last year. I think he went through a lot of rookie kind of missteps early. I think the Lions had to play him a little bit earlier than they wanted to just because of some injuries. And he even mentioned it himself, like he wasn't trusting himself. He was overthinking everything and then kind of settled in towards the end of last year. And I think he's really kind of a protege almost of Tracy Walker, and that they have almost two of him now. I think it might be a little bit slower of a transition for him just because BC wasn't necessarily the biggest and best of college programs. But I do think he's someone that might surprise some people this year.
What about Trufant? Coming off injuries, been in the league for a while.
Yeah.
He almost reminds me of the. I wrote his name down. I forgot it. I'm not even going to bring it up. But do you remember about 10 years ago, one of Mayhew's first moves, he traded for the cornerback from Atlanta Falcons. Second year, he was a second-round pick.
Yeah.
He came in as a cornerback. He did pretty well here. Then he got hurt, and it's going to drive me crazy his name, but I'll figure it out. The Trufant thing,
Yeah.
you know, he's an older guy coming off injuries. What do you see him at the second slot? Or he's not a slot guy. He's a corner, but you know, opposite of
Okudah. Yeah.
Okudah.
I mean, it's interesting. I think the Lions definitely needed a veteran presence there. I think obviously someone to help Jeff Okudah along early in the season, and also Amani Oruwariye, last year's 5th-round pick, who's been really developed.
Yeah, he made
quite
some
well.
sneaky plays at the end of the year too.
Yeah, I think he's a guy that could really see a lot of playing time this year that maybe Lions fans aren't expecting. But with Trufant, I think he's just kind of a solid guy. I don't think he's necessarily going to be the Pro Bowl player he was in the first couple of years of his career. Injuries, I think, have taken a toll on him. But I think if he does manage to stay healthy, and you know that's always kind of a coin flip every year, I think he's going to be an above-average player and really a kind of almost leader in that secondary just because of the young age of really everyone in that secondary.
Did Bob Quinn make a mistake getting rid of Darius Slay, not keeping him and teaming him up with Okudah for the next 3, 4, 5 years?
I wouldn't say that was a Bob Quinn mistake. I think the relationship with Matt Patricia had clearly soured to a point where there was just no going forward. And so if you want to put blame on anyone for him having to be traded away, it was obviously an issue with Matt Patricia.
Would you have rather seen him here as a Lion?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think even though he had a down year in 2019, I think Darius Slay is still a top 10, maybe even a top 5 cornerback. And so him and Okudah would have been so much fun to watch. No question.
The guy I miss is Diggs, the safety. That's
Yeah.
who I miss. You know, that one that was a head scratcher, and he had some attitude. And, you know, every sport, baseball, basketball, you always have to have some guy in the locker room that's going to stir the pot a little bit. You know, as long as they're respectful, you got to stir the pot a little bit.
Yeah. It doesn't necessarily surprise me to hear that the Darius Slay may have been an issue in the locker room. Quandre Diggs, though, that one I have a little bit harder understanding.
Yeah.
And surely someone's face with the media is not necessarily who they are as a person. Some people can put on a show, but you hear Quandre Diggs' story, you hear how fans adored him and how he kind of replicated that to fans and some of the things he did in the community. He didn't really come across as an arrogant person who would stir the pot too much. And maybe it did get to that point in the locker room. I'm obviously not there. I can't say for sure what happened there, but it also seems like there was something sour that happened there, and that was a surprise to me.
Another good pick by Mayhew, 5th-round pick out of Texas, man. Another good pick, you know. So hate to see those guys go, especially when they're coming into their prime, you know.
And just a few months after he signed an extension too. It's very odd.
What do you make of Jared Davis? Is he? I mean, they told him we're not signing you to your
5th year extension.
5th year, yeah. And then they come out and say, well, you know what? He's our guy. He's our team guy. We love him. And what's going on there? Does he stay at linebacker? Does he stay at the middle linebacker position?
He's going to be there for at least the beginning of the year for sure. I think the coaching staff is still very much all in on him in terms of like the work ethic, in terms of the locker room, in terms of all that sort of things. Jared Davis is an example of who every coach wants to coach. It's just a matter of, I think, everything in between the ears in terms of, you know, he's got the athleticism, he's got the work ethic. It's just something's not clicking when he's out there on the field. And it's frustrating to watch because he's such an easy guy to root for. He's such a nice person, such a hard worker. Yeah. And obviously the Lions invested a lot in him being a first-round pick, but it just something the processing of the game isn't clicking with him, and it's unfortunate to see because I think everyone is on his side. But
Sometimes it takes the right coaching staff to put you in the right position.
Yeah, there's that too.
Kyle Van Noy, right?
Sure.
Put you in the right
Absolutely.
position. So maybe if he goes to a different team, they put him in the right position, and maybe it is a defensive end position. I'm just throwing it out there, but
Yeah.
maybe it is. Maybe they say you're going to rush on third downs, and that's all you're going to do.
Right.
And maybe that's how you're going to produce for us. So who knows? So yeah, I pull for a kid like that. Deshaun Hand. Another injury away from. That's unfortunate. They traded up for this guy.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because it was a move that was highly revered when it happened.
Yeah.
The Lions really needed a defensive lineman in that draft, and at the time they didn't have a pick in the 4th round, and so they trade up and get one and spend next year's 3rd round on it. And he came out looking really, really good in his first year. Obviously, that ended with an injury. Barely got to play last year with all the injuries he had to deal with before the season, during the season. Early in camp, he's looked good, though. He's looked like he's really coming with a purpose. And if he can stay healthy, I do think we could see a big jump out of him again this year. One thing the Lions, line has really been missing since those Ndamukong Suh days is a really strong force in the middle that can rush the passer. They've had guys like Ashawn Robinson and Snacks who are good at defending the run, but not someone who's quick and strong who can get to the quarterback.
Snacks, forget about Snacks. Boy, that didn't end well. Reggie Ragland was a guy I wanted in a draft, and I don't remember who they took in the 1st round, but I really wanted him. I remember I targeted him, I wanted him. Then he fell to the 2nd round. They didn't take him, and he obviously was with Kansas City. Buffalo traded him right away. I was shocked by that. Andy Reid picks him up, and now he's here. Maybe. Second string guy, third,
Yeah, I think he's going to start as a second string guy. I think he might get moved into the rotation a bit and see some legitimate playing time. I've spoken to the defensive coordinator of the team, Corey Unland, and he's thrilled with how he's looked through training camp. And so I think he's kind of an underrated guy. I think he's a guy that has Super Bowl winning experience. He's a guy obviously had a lot of talent. To get drafted in the 2nd round. Yeah. He actually worked, he was at Alabama with Bo Davis, the Lions defensive line coach. Yeah. Obviously he's a different position than a defensive line coach, but I think Bo Davis knows what he wants in him. A lot of Alabama guys tend to fit really well in this Lions defense. So I think there's a chance he gets some legitimate contributions this year, kind of as a rotational guy to begin with. And who knows what happens with, Jared Davis, some of the young guys, if they aren't performing, I wouldn't be surprised to see him take over a starting role at some point.
Of course, the Alabama guys fit. Nick Saban,
yeah.
Bill Belichick, New England, Alabama, of course.
Yeah.
So 2020 Lions. For me, I'm going to say point blank, when this thing airs, it's probably going to be could be week 2 of the season. I think if the Lions want to win 9 games this year, Kerryon Johnson and DeAndre Swift have to run the ball 25, 30 times a game. Yeah. I really believe that. They have to control the clock and keep that defense off the field. How do you see it?
I think that's exactly what they want to do. You talk to Matt Patricia, he talks about the two biggest keys of the game are running the ball and stopping the run. And I know that sounds backwards in today's NFL when we're talking about guys like Patrick Mahomes ad nauseum, but there is something to be said about that, of ball control, and it kind of eliminates margin of error if you're able to bleed so much clock that you limit possession. So you score, you get ahead, you limit possessions for the other team, you're probably going to win the game. And so, yeah, you just look at the way they've built this team over the past few years with Bob Quinn, drafting a ton of offensive linemen, drafting a ton of running backs. Yeah, that's what they're looking to do for sure. And whether it works or not, we're going to have to see. We haven't seen a running game really come together since Barry Sanders for an entire season. So forgive me for being a little bit skeptical, but obviously I think the biggest improvements really have to happen on defense, because the offense was rolling early last season and they were still 3-4-1.
But a good running game could help the defense.
Absolutely.
Right? So those guys, so basically they want to try to beat the Seattle Seahawks, maybe, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I believe that as well, too. Now, to go back to Kenny Galladay, if they want to do that and they want to run that ball, let's say they want to run the ball 30 times a game, do they give that much money to Kenny Galladay, or do they try to trade him? As a fan, I'll be upset if they just lose him.
Yeah.
Because I've seen enough of giving away players and just lose them. If you're not going to sign him long term, you better trade him. But if they want to run the ball 30 times a game, do they look and say, well, this is the New England way, we're not giving Kenny Galladay all that money?
It's an interesting question. I still think they do, because I do think they still value that deep ball. I think they understand that while a running game is important to manage the clock and pick up those small, gritty yards when it's 3rd and short and things like that, I think Darrell Bevell, the offensive coordinator, really understands the value of the deep ball in this game, and you have to take your shots. You have to be able to go deep so that you can kind of take those linebackers a few yards off the line of scrimmage. Otherwise, if you're running the ball 30 times a game, suddenly the entire defense is going to close in on you, and that's the perfect opportunity to go deep. And if you have a guy like Kenny Golladay, it's certainly a lot easier to do so.
Couple more questions for me. Give me a surprise rookie starter on offense, one on defense, or if you see any.
Ooh. Well, yeah, I think you're definitely going to see Jonah Jackson start at left guard this year, and
That's the kid from Ohio State, correct?
Yeah, yep. I'm sorry, right guard this year, and he's going to be great, I think. From what I've seen in training camp, he has all the tools. He looks comfortable. He looks like he's been in that position for the past 3 years in the NFL. So I think he's going to start and obviously be very good right away. Kind of sticking with offense, Quintus Cephas is another guy that's looked very well. Unfortunately, he's just behind a really talented core of wide receivers, so he won't be in the starting lineup right away. But I came into camp thinking he was only going to get maybe 10 catches this year. I think it might be a little bit more than that after seeing what he's done so far.
I had high hopes for Travis Fulgham. Now turn around, look, he's gone. He's with the Green Bay Packers. Like, what happened to him?
Well, they actually waived him too, so I'm not sure where he's at now.
Yeah, so why are we drafting these players, just waving them, and then they're getting Michael Roberts got picked up by the Green Bay Packers as well too. I don't know if he's still there, but
Yeah, no.
I'm like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
I had high hopes for him, but yeah, Cephas is a guy. They say if he wasn't hurt, he would have been a first, second round pick. So I remember when they were talking about him in the draft. What about the offensive guard from Kentucky and the running back from New Mexico? I know a lot of people were surprised by that pick. I wasn't, because a lot of people put in a lot of stock into that Maryland running back.
Ty Johnson.
Ty Johnson.
Yeah.
I don't know what they saw in him, and nothing against him. I don't know what they saw, but I thought this kid from New Mexico, I see what they're doing. They're trying to beat the Seattle Seahawks. They're trying to run the ball, control the clock, keep that defense off the field.
Yeah.
So the kid from Kentucky, the offensive guard, can you see him get a little play this year? How's he looked?
He's looked a little bit less comfortable. I mean, he came from Kentucky where they ran the ball a million times.
Supposedly he was a smaller, right? He wanted to pancake you every time.
Absolutely, and that worked well in a very run-heavy offense. But in the NFL, you're going to be throwing the ball a lot more than they did at Kentucky. So he still kind of has to learn that pass protection, sets and all of that sort of stuff before I think they put him in the starting lineup. They still want to protect Stafford as the face of the franchise. Sure. You don't want to throw a liability out there right away. So. Yeah. I think they're going to take it slow with him. I wouldn't expect him to start any games this year unless there's a lot of injuries, and I would probably put him third or fourth on the totem pole behind some of the veterans that they already have. In terms of Jason Hundley, the running back, he's looked fun in camp. He's definitely a little bit faster than Ty Johnson is. He's definitely a little bit better runner between the tackles, but he's also kind of that McKinnon role that they had last year, where he's going to catch some passes out of the backfield, kind of like I think most people expect of Deandre Swift. So he's a fun guy. I think he does have a similar skill set to Ty Johnson, though. I'd probably put in terms of his athletic traits, he's a little more athletic than Ty Johnson.
Yeah, he looks like a powerful runner too. He's like short, thick legs.
Exactly.
They say he could run through you or around you.
Yeah, and I think you just see with all the additions the Lions have made at running back, they like speed. They're trying to get faster, while they can also kind of provide that kind of physical beat. Like Kerryon Johnson is a guy that is not afraid to kind of lower his head and lower the boom. And so we've kind of seen them add these veteran, power backs like Bo Scarborough last year and LeGarrette Blount before that. I'm starting to think they might kind of move away from that kind of player and get kind of the guys that can do both, like Kerryon Johnson, like DeAndre Swift. He's a really fast, kind of shifty type, but again, he's a guy that'll lower his head and pick up those gritty third and short yards too.
I hope fans don't give up on Kerryon, because I see him, if you give him the ball maybe 12 or 15 times a game versus 25, he'll be more productive.
That's their hope.
Yeah, and I really believe that with him, So almost like bad example, but Ryan Rayburn, if you only started him once a week, he'll hit you a home run. But if you play him every day, he's going to strike out every time.
Yeah.
Right? So bad example. Whatever happened to the kid, the offensive lineman that Bob Quinn signed last year to a rookie contract? He broke the record. He was an undrafted rookie. Whatever happened?
Bo Benshaw?
But yeah.
Yeah. So I think we'll see when the video drops, but I think he's going to make the team as the team's backup center. He's basically been getting a lot of reps there. He started as a guard last year, and then towards the end of last year, they started kind of moving him to center in practice. We never got to see any of it, but he was a guy that I think a lot of people thought was going to get drafted in 2019. He goes undrafted, and the Lions swoop him up. So I think there's a chance to see him this year if anything, happens to Frank Ragnow. But he's a guy that they're just kind of developing to be that guy just in case. And yeah, we might see him, we might not.
Last two questions. Again, this may air first, second week of the season, but give me a surprise or two cut.
I think Bo Scarborough might be a surprise cut for some people. Obviously, he was a great story last year. He came in, almost had back-to-back 100-yard games in his first 2 NFL games ever. But like I said, I think they're kind of phasing away from the need of that. And he's not a guy that necessarily contributes a lot on special teams. He's dealt with a lot of injuries in his career. He's dealing with one at the beginning of this year. And so I think it might be tough for him to kind of make the roster given all of the talent, all of the guys that they've drafted in the past 2 years alone.
Yeah. So I wouldn't want this to happen, but I can see Kenny Galladay getting traded. I really can.
Yeah.
And for hopefully for something really good.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can see it, and again, I wouldn't want that to happen.
Yeah.
But if for some reason Cephas were to come out and start hot off the bat, by trade deadline, who knows? But again, I'd hate to see it, but the New England way with Bob, you just never know with those guys,
That's true. I would say the wide receiver more likely to be traded is Marvin Jones.
Yeah.
And that's maybe more of like a midseason type thing. We've seen the Lions kind of be sellers at the trade deadline when, the season hasn't gone as planned. So, Marvin Jones also entering the final year of his contract.
It might be a good change for him to get out of here.
For
too.
sure. And
he's his personal life,
Right. And there's a good chance he doesn't get re-signed anyway. So Lions might kind of take it from a point of view. Let's get something while we can. If the season goes south, then there's not much point in keeping a guy like him around necessarily if you're not going to re-sign him. I really do think Kenny Galladay, though, is someone that the Lions really, really like. He fits kind of the personality, too, of just kind of like, he's not flashy. He just kind of puts his head down and does the work. And so I think they like him enough where I wouldn't be surprised to see him signed in the next couple days, really.
Well, they should, because Bob Quinn's got to keep one of his draft picks around.
Right.
Seriously. So, what do you make of the Calvin Johnson situation? Every year it's the same. He's coming out this time of year with Dave Burkett, and nothing against Dave Burkett, but every year he's chirping with the Lions, and not my business, and many other people, it's not their business. But why do we have to hear about it all the time?
Because people keep asking. I mean, he could kind of pass the buck and say, I don't want to answer that question, and I think a lot of times he does. But as long as people keep asking, as long as this relationship with the franchise is fractured, people are going to continue to ask him, and I don't blame him for answering, honestly. I mean, he feels how he feels. The most recent one, I thought he took it actually very, maturely. He just said, I'm doing my thing, they're doing their thing. Let's leave it at that. And, he did kind of cross the bridge a little bit this year. He talked to the Lions wide receiving core for the first time, because he still has a good standing relationship with the wide receiver coach. So joined a Zoom, talked to all the young guys, which is something I think a lot of Lions fans wanted to see, because seeing him out there I think he was with the Dolphins camp one year and the Raiders camp, that's when it really hurts as a fan, especially. Like, you see him helping other teams, and he's, won't step in Allen Park to help the Lions. That really hurts for me. So I'm usually the kind of guy that takes the player's point of view. I think the Lions did do him dirty when he retired. I think you see a lot of teams since they don't go after that signing bonus. It's just something that you don't do, even though legally speaking the Lions were well within their rights. It's just not something you do for one of the greatest, certainly the greatest wide receiver this team has ever had, and a guy who stayed with the Lions his entire career.
Do you think he's the first ballot Hall of Famer?
I think he should be. I think when I think of a Hall of Famer, I think of, can you rewrite the history of football without this guy? And he's a guy who sets the record for the most receiving yards in a season, and a guy who was on the cover of Madden, and a guy who was, just the iconic, one of the most freaky athletic, best highlight reel machines of our era. And so, I think he should be.
There's a couple of great wide receivers out there that aren't in the Hall of Fame right now. And Isaac Bruce is one of them. Sure. And the kid from Indianapolis, Reggie Wayne.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of great wide receivers had some really good careers and both won Super Bowls. Do I believe Calvin Johnson's a Hall of Famer? I do. He's a Hall of Famer. I don't think he should go on before those two guys. I really don't.
It's a good case to be made. And it's really, if you look at first ballot Hall of Fame wide receivers, there's about 5 of them.
Yeah.
So for him to join that group is a tough ask. And I understand, there's a lot of things working against him. No playoff wins, no Super Bowl rings. His career ended after 9 seasons instead of 10. And, there isn't longevity of a guy like Larry Fitzgerald, who almost certainly will be a first ballot Hall of Famer, but I just think of his era when he was in the game. He was just such a dominant force that, you know, there was no question this guy was a top 5 wide receiver for every single year he was out there. And so, to me, that's Hall of Fame worthy. If you're a top 5 guy every single year you play the game, you're a Hall of Famer.
Last question for me. Matthew Stafford. He doesn't win a division, doesn't win a playoff game. Is he a Hall of Famer? Now, the numbers, let's just say he plays 5 more years.
Yeah.
Which I don't see. He's got a young family with everything going on. And I've seen the history of the Lions.
Sure.
Great stars leave.
Sure.
And who would blame him? Let's just say he plays 5 more years. They don't win a division, they win a playoff game. Is he a Hall of Famer?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, he'll be in the Detroit Hall of Fame. He'll probably be in the Ring of Honor here in Detroit.
Michigan Hall of Fame.
Yeah, but it's hard because he doesn't have that one distinct year where he was the MVP, where he was the best player out there. He's only made 1 Pro Bowl so far. Yeah. And say what you will about the Pro Bowl, I think it's you know, popularity contest, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't think you can be a Hall of Famer if you were, you know, barely top 10 kind of guy in the NFL for as long as he was. I think he's the best quarterback the Lions have ever had. Again, I think he's a guy who can win a Super Bowl. But until he does, or until he has that career-defining year where he's in MVP the conversation, or maybe even wins an MVP, I mean, his career trajectory is basically like Matt Ryan, who I think is also kind of like a borderline Hall of Fame. But Matt Ryan has a Super Bowl appearance. Matt Ryan has an MVP.
They're good friends, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They're great. They're great friends. And so I think he needs at least 1 or 2 career-defining years that he hasn't had yet. And a Super Bowl certainly wouldn't hurt either.
You know what? I think he's going to get a playoff win here or a division. I really believe that. But I think if he doesn't, what hurt him is when they were 9-4, and they had to win 1 game to win the division and get a home playoff game, and they couldn't win those last 3 games or 4 games or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I think that really hurt. I think if he doesn't win, they're going to look back at that chance. That was your chance right there.
Yeah.
And I forgot the year.
I think it was 2013.
Yeah, that's when they had that was their chance.
Yeah.
And they'll look back at that. And right or wrong, you know, it bothers me when everyone puts everything on Matthew Stafford.
Yeah.
But Sue didn't have any playoff wins. Calvin didn't have any playoff wins.
Right.
You know, Billy Sims didn't have any playoff wins. We can go way back. But,
right.
You know, it bothers me that he gets all that. But he is the quarterback. It's going to happen.
That's how it works in the NFL.
Absolutely. Listen, keep up the great work.
Hey, man, you too.
Thank you so much for being part of this.
Appreciate
Okay.
you having me.
Thank you, man.
Les Stanford Chevrolet Cadillac is a family-owned and operated full-line Chevrolet Cadillac dealership located in downtown Dearborn, Michigan. For the past 50 years, Les Stanford has been dedicated to excellent customer service in sales, service, and auto body repair. We have all the resources available to make a fantastic car buying and servicing experience. This includes a massive selection of Chevrolet, Cadillac, and certified pre-owned inventory to choose from, free loaner vehicles for service and collision center customers, and a finance source for every type of credit situation. Come experience the Les Stanford Chevrolet Cadillac difference today by visiting our showrooms in Dearborn, Michigan, or shop online at lesstanford.com.